All right, everybody. I'm Johanna Rothman. I think I do not have an official introducer, which is fine with me, because I have a big enough mouth for almost everybody. And this is becoming an Agile leader regardless of your role. So if you wanted to be here for this, you're in the right place. And if you wanted to be somewhere else, now is the time to go. All right. So let's talk a little bit about leadership. We have these traditional views of leadership where it's a guide or a champion or a lead or a manager, and you might champion a cause, people follow you, right? The leader is out in front. And you know what? That really doesn't fit for Agile, at least not right now in my understanding of Agile. Agile is about collaborating as a team. So where is the leadership? It has to be in the team. And that means that you want some kind of servant leadership. So I'm not going to talk about the 7 aspects of servant leadership in this particular talk, but I want to suggest to you that we need leaders at all levels in Agile. And I have levels in quotes there because it does not matter if you are a developer or a BA or a product owner or a tester or a project manager or a program manager or an executive. We need leadership from every single person in the organization to make Agile happen, or at least to solve the problems in the organization that you might only see when you become Agile. So I'd like to tell you a couple of stories of what I call inadvertent leadership. The picture on the left is a picture of a printed circuit board. How many of you are old enough to remember printed circuit boards? Oh, at least some of you. This is good. So I was a software engineer working on a machine vision system to inspect the pads on printed circuit boards. The pads are those round things. And you can see that a printed circuit board is green. It's a green picture, and you can see that they were green. And the pads are a reflective silver. And let me tell you, the cameras we had back then, back in the 80s, were kind of, well, they were big, right? Kind of like this big, but bigger. And they had 16 pixels of grayscale, right? So you could get 1024 by 1024, but you only had 16 bits of grayscale. No color, right? Nothing like is what in your phone right now. Your phone has a much, much better camera than I had access to back then. So we had to do this inspection system. And the guys, right, the guys with all the optics degrees and the physics degrees, and they had come from MIT. I did not go to MIT, and I work in Boston. This is a problem, right? So they said, we can't light the board. We can't actually see what's on the board. We don't get a really even image. We get reflection here, and we don't get enough reflection there. It's a real problem. So I said, have we tried any color lights? And they said, those aren't the droids they're looking for, right? They said, it can't be the lights. It's not the lights. It's gotta be the algorithm. I said, well, it could be the algorithm. Could be the lights. Should we do an experiment? We don't need to do an experiment. So, if you've seen me, if you were here last year, you know I do not ask permission first. I ask for forgiveness later. So I went out the next morning on my way to work and stopped by the lighting store and picked up a red and a yellow and a blue and a green light. And they all fit into the fixtures, so it was okay. And I said, which light should I try first? And one of the guys said, don't bother with the green, right? The green is never, ever going to work. So I listened to him, not too bright sometimes. And I tried the red first. We did not get any contrast at all. I tried the yellow, a little bit of contrast. I tried the blue, a little bit of contrast in different areas. I tried the green, lit up like a Christmas tree. We could see the pads, we could see the background, we could see everything. And then we could actually debug the algorithm, which, yes, had a couple of little problems with it. So we started to ship those systems with green lights. until the cameras got a lot better. Now, I did not ask anybody, do you think I should get green lights? And I spent about $10 of my own money, which I believe I put in for petty cash. I believe I did. But even if not, it was only $10. So I served my team. I moved the project along. I helped them figure out, because they were stuck, right? We see this all the time with people who are just totally, totally stuck, that it can't be this. That's why I said, these aren't the droids you're looking for, right? It can't be in that part of the code. It can't be in that part of the test. It won't be in those features. So when you hear that, or when it comes to how you work on your project, it can't be our stand-up. It can't be the mixture of 17 people on a team when we really only need 4 or 5. So those are all things. When you hear it can't be, just think those aren't the droids you're looking for and kind of zero in there. So a few years later, I was actually a tester this time on a machine that, a Symbolics 3600. I'm sure that none of you remember Symbolics. It was the highlight of my professional career, and I'm so sad that they went under. Oh well. But we thought that we would actually compete with Sun and HP and Prime, right, and other more manufacturers that no longer exist anymore. So this is back in the day of roll your own networking, roll your own disk drivers, roll your own everything. We had an operating system, we had disk drivers, we had networking. This is before TCP/IP and FTP were standard, right? So this is in the 80s again. And the guy who was working on a particular disk drive to put into this machine really had trouble. He thought he was done, he thought he was done, he thought he was done, and it would come to me and I would test it and it would not be done. So I sent it back to him. So after a couple of weeks of this, yes, a couple of weeks, he and I were quite frustrated. I finally said, what if I give you my tests and you can run them? And I'll think of more and worse tests. So of course he rolled his eyes and said, okay, but I'll take the tests you have now because they're totally automated, and then you can be thinking of worse tests because we can't ship right now. We were doing slip a week every week, so we had no predictability for when we could actually ship. So I gave him my tests, and then we did not make any progress for a couple of weeks. So I said, Charlie, would you like it if we actually walked through the code together? I know you've had review on the code, I know, but maybe if you explain it to me, I'm just a tester, let me roll my eyes here, then maybe I can understand what you're doing. I can devise even better tests, and you can figure out what's going wrong. It's like talk to the duck. Anyone know who here does not know about talk to the duck? Oh, several hands. So talk to the duck is a very important problem-solving technique. You put a duck, I wish I had a duck. You put a duck in front of you, and then you explain the problem to the duck out loud, in words, right? No, you don't whisper to the duck. This is talk to the duck. So you say duck, and I happen to like saying duck. You might say yellow ducky, if you have a yellow one, but I say duck, the disk drive doesn't work. And here are the symptoms of the disk drive not working. Well, I had brought in a rubber duck from our house because I had 2 small children at the time, and bath time was a very exciting time. So I had permission to bring in a yellow rubber ducky. I brought the duck in, and Charlie explained to both the duck and to me what was happening. And I got to ask my stupid questions, right? Because if you don't understand what's going on, you think that your questions are stupid. They are not stupid. This is how you learn stuff. So I actually, Charlie, and in talking to the duck, said, oh, and he was all set to go off and fix that one thing. And I said, why don't we write that down and keep it for all of the other O's you're going to discover. Oh, no, there can't be any more, right? Those aren't the droids you're looking for. So I said, let's just imagine that there might be a few more things. I know you're really good, but you've been stuck on this for a month. You don't get stuck on anything for a month. So he said, oh, fine, I'll just keep talking to the duck. He found 5 more things. all of which were the problems that he needed to fix. He went back and he fixed them in about, I think it took longer than a day, maybe a couple of days. And then he said, your tests are going to pass with flying colors. And they did. And we were able to ship the system. So what I did there was I didn't go out and buy lights again, but I provided him with a different problem-solving technique, one that was totally different from what he had tried before. So talk to the duck is an excellent problem-solving technique. Yes, if you're like me, you might feel a little weird talking to the duck, especially since you have to talk out loud. Duck, I'm having trouble with this book, right? Duck, I'm having trouble with this spreadsheet, and here is the problem. But every time I have talked to the duck, because I have to articulate the problem, I have had good results. So what did I do there? If we think about what the common themes are, I saw a problem, and it's almost always a sticky problem. So if any of you were here for Gil Brose's keynote, he talked about the problems in a stand-up. Some of those are very, very sticky problems, right? They go on forever. You feel like they're serial status meetings. They're not what you need to do for micro-commitments. So you can see a problem in your organization. And then you might brainstorm ideas yourself. You might brainstorm ideas with other people. But the idea is you don't try and solve the problem yourself. You enlist allies in the organization, right? So you might enlist the allies to do the brainstorming. You might enlist the allies after you've done some brainstorming. One of the things I really like is Jerry Weinberg's rule of three. The rule of three in its original incarnation, I believe, said, if you can't think of three things that are causing the problem, you don't understand the problem well enough. And so I like what are three possible causes of this problem? I also like, what are three possible solutions for this problem? And now I have the rule of three on both sides. So you'll notice that I also did experiments. I was not wedded to one or more of my solutions. Yeah, with the printed circuit board, I was pretty sure it was the lighting. But I didn't know if the colored lights would work. Maybe we needed a spotlight, right? We might have needed any number of things until we could figure out what it was. And with Talk to the Duck, with the disk drive problem, it was one of those things where I said, how can we see all of the issues? How can we get out all of the issues, maybe all at once, but at least not over a period of a month? And with the experiments, we could try stuff. And especially if you use safe to fail experiments, right? What was the cost of changing the lights? Not very much money, right? What was the cost of talking to the duck and doing a code review with Charlie? We had already spent a month. We were not any closer to release. So the cost of the time to do that was really pretty small. So the costs are very small. In our experiments, we had a chance to see what we could and might not be able to do. And then we could go and create our new realities. So that's one of the things that I think is, these things are pieces of the leadership I would like you to consider. Now, I realize that since it's after lunch, you will need a little bit of awakeness, because otherwise I might put you to sleep, and I don't want that. So I would like you to think of a question or a problem that you want to solve in your organization. I bet you came here to this session thinking, I can exhibit some agile leadership when I'm done. So maybe there's a particular problem. What's a sticky problem you have? What's an issue for your team? What's slowing your adoption of Agile or anything like that? Please make it as small and specific as you can and discuss it with your neighbor for 1 minute. Yes, I'm assuming you will work in pairs, or if you have 3 people at a table, you might want to all talk together. So I'm going to time you for a minute. Go. Okay. Anyone willing to share their problems with us? Oh, a sharer, yes. I did not quite hear you. How do you get QA to share their tests? Oh, how do you get QA to get through their tests? Oh, so if you are transitioning from all manual testing to a combination of manual and automated and exploratory testing, that's a big deal. Yes. That's a very big deal. So that's, I might, if you're willing to take a little feedback, I might say, choose one project. Because if you try and do this for the whole organization, wow, that's a huge thing. But if you think about one project, that might work. Because then you have some specifics. Do we have other sharers? Because we have a microphone. No? Okay. I can't quite see the hands, if there are any hands over here. The reason I'm not standing is because I have TDS, too darn short syndrome. So you would not be able to see me over the lectern. I chose the wrong parents. I'm not going to fix that problem. That's just a permanent problem. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what leadership is. So you all, I hope, have something concrete in mind, and you want to change something about the status quo. So this courageous woman says, yes, I would like to go from all manual testing to more automated testing so QA can get through their tests and actually we can finish something. I hope that's what you meant when you said that. And I suspect others of you want to change something about the status quo. One thing I have noticed, especially in organizations, is that all of these changes require some kind of collaboration in order to go from the old way to the new way. So if you think about what do leaders do, instead of the old image of the leader out in front helping the troops charge, let's think about the leader as part of the team. How do we have someone who collaborates with other people? How do we have people who can create effective change when the situation changes? So if you are transitioning to Agile and you have the problem of maybe you have the ivory tower architects, right? And you have the QA problem where they don't have sufficient automated tests. Your Agile approach is going to look a lot more like water scrum fall or water iterations fall, right? That's not very helpful. It's probably better than what you were doing, but not as good as you could do. So that means that you understand that you can create effective change when the situation changes. You have to be adaptable. One of the things I often think about with change is I'm always asking other people to change. And I have to be able to adapt and change as much as the other people, right? That's a key piece, I think, for leadership. So if I have a nice phrase here, and it's my working definition of adaptable leadership. Adaptable leaders create effective change when the situation changes. Now, they don't do this alone, right? They might have the original idea, but they don't have to work alone, because working collaboratively is almost always better. They don't have to brainstorm alone, but they can help create effective change when things change. Now, one thing I have noticed is that change invites reinvention. Any of you realize that your jobs are totally different now that you're moving to Agile or you're in Agile? Okay, so a few of you. Some of you have some difference in your jobs. Yeah, there's at least some change. So what I have always thought of is that I like to take advantage of these opportunities for change. I also want to make more opportunities for change, not just for myself, but for my colleagues, for people around me. and that means I will probably have to experiment. Now, I happen to like change. I have a very dear friend who is not from the change people. He stayed in a job for, I think, over 20 years when he realized in his second year that he did not like the job, right? That's a long time to stay in a job you don't like. And he had all kinds of rationalizations for it. The benefits were good. He could take 4 weeks of vacation. I said, you need 4 weeks of vacation to deal with this horrible job. He said, I don't want to hear it from you anymore, right? So I like to make more opportunities, not fewer opportunities. And I like to experiment. And that's because of the way I make my choices. So the choices I make are based on my personal mission. And what you're looking at here is my career timeline. So at the very beginning of my career, I was pretty happy about stuff, and then I didn't have any work to do, and then I decided to leave that company. And then I had a few really good years of working for another company. And then I had a very steep decline. You can see that very large decline. And what happened there was I was the one who said, we can't keep shipping software that breaks every time our customers use it. I thought that was a reasonable thing to say. So my boss said, you're in charge of making sure all of our software works. So I put in the notion of release criteria so we would know when everything was done. And I had a little checklist for our releases. And they decided that meant I was in software support. I said, no, this is not software support. This is project management. I'm not a support person. I will support my products, and you guys support your own. And so my boss said, well, I don't know how long you're going to be here. You have a boyfriend in another state, and you're not doing the kinds of things I want you to do. And I said, I want to do those kinds of things. You haven't let me do them. So I want to do better work. So I was going down and down and down. And I finally said, this is stupid. Why am I here? I'm going to find another opportunity for myself because I'm not learning. So I found a new job and bumped up. So for me, if I look at my career timeline, it's all about learning new things and having new and interesting things to do. That's a hallmark of a person who likes change. You do not have to share the same values I have. In fact, you probably don't want to share those values because you're you. And you should be the best you as possible. And you should not be me. So I think it's really important to say, what values do you have? What is it that you like about work? And why do you work? And it's not just to make enough money, right? That you have to make enough money so that money is off the table. But you need to be able to say, why do you work? What is it about your work that really excites you? And that's your personal mission. Right, so my personal mission is all about learning and changing and doing new things. So when I started my consulting business, you can see it just went up. Right, that's the very end of this timeline. So a career timeline can actually tell you a lot about why you work and what you like to do, at least the values of it. When you think about that, you can think about what you bring to leadership. So I don't know if you've ever seen The Golden Circle from Simon Sinek. But if you think about what you do and why you do it and how you do it, he says that leaders always start with why. So when I talked about my stories of inadvertent leadership before, it was all about being able to ship working product. Right? That's the why. That's why I did those things that I did, not thought of leadership as I did them, but turned out to be leadership. So you need to understand your purpose. So why is it that you work? What purpose drives you? I suspect, like some autonomy in how you work. So purpose, autonomy, and mastery come from Dan Pink's drive. That's why we work. So autonomy is how you do things. Since I'm always revved up by learning, I want to be able to take time to learn on my projects, to learn as I go along. And I want the mastery of knowing I have done a good job, that I have done the best job I can, that I'm capable of. So when you think about autonomy, purpose, and mastery, what do you think of in your current job? So if you go back to your little problem, which I'm hoping is small and specific and not huge, but it might be huge, what about your purpose, your autonomy, and your mastery is involved in solving that problem? Is it so you can work better as a team? Is it about delivering value to your customers? Is it about releasing products that work? It could be any of those things, and it could be more. So when you think about starting with your why is what drives you. It's your personal mission. And then how does your purpose, your autonomy, and your mastery play into that? Because that's where you will find opportunities for your leadership. Now here's something I figured out a long time ago. Everyone lives up or down to other people's expectations, and especially our expectations of ourselves. So for many years, I thought I was a terrible writer. I would ask my colleagues in tech pubs to review my memos, because this is back when we wrote memos, right, as opposed to emails that you would write now. And I would say, Jonathan, please review this so I make sure I have all of my sentences making sense and I have the conclusion in the right place, because I really want the VP to understand this and to read it and understand it and take action. He would often say to me, a verb, JR, a verb. You have a sentence of 33 words and no verbs. You need a verb. So I used to think I was a terrible writer. And now I've been practicing my writing. So I'm not a terrible writer anymore. I have a lot of verbs. I have some adjectives. I have a lot of nouns. I try not to use adverbs. But I have a way of writing that works for me, that allows people to understand what I write when I write it. So his expectation of me was that I could learn. And my expectation of myself was I have the potential to learn. And everyone on your team has the potential to learn. So if you have the problem of architects up front who want to design the entire system before you even get to it, they have the potential to learn evolutionary architecture. They do. I am convinced of it, because they did not come out of school knowing how to do architecture that very first day. I also know this, because I might not know them, but I know people just like them. They had to have experience to learn how to design systems. And if you think about the QA people, they might not know yet how to write automated tests and fill in with exploratory tests, because what they've done right now is manual testing, because they had the time to do it. So this mindset, the idea of possibility, the idea that you could learn, is part of Carol Dweck's fixed and growth mindset. If you have not read the Mindset book by Carol Dweck, I highly recommend it. I have a list of all the books at the end of this presentation, so it's okay. You don't have to write it down right now. But the fixed mindset says you're born with fixed skills or talents. And the growth mindset says that skills arise from hard work. You can improve. So let me tell you another little story about me. I started to take French in the 3rd grade. Anyone here ever take French in school? Yeah. In 10th grade, my French teacher said to me, I will give you a B if you promise never to speak French again as long as you live. Yeah, I was not so good at French. So the worst part was my speaking was really horrible. I'm from southeastern Massachusetts, so when I spoke French, I had a southeastern Massachusetts accent on top of French. This is really horrible. It offends anybody who can speak or hear French. It's just horrible. And I was not so excited about having to write French. French and I did not get along, which was really interesting because I let that guy decide how I was going to attack foreign languages, especially French, for about 40 years. And then I met somebody from Belgium who speaks English, French, Dutch, and possibly other languages. I only know about those 3. He might speak more. And I said, he started to talk to me in French, and I did not even realize I was responding in French when he actually talked to me. Because I'd taken 7 or 8 years of French in all those years in grammar school up through high school. So I still had some knowledge back here, but I had not actually explicitly used it until he prompted me to. So that's when he said, "You're letting your old French teacher run your life?" I thought, oh, that's a big deal. No, I'm not going to let that guy run my life. He's probably retired by now. I'm sure he's retired by now. And I'm sure he's not speaking French to anybody anymore, because that was not his first language either. So I even have the capability of learning French. I'm not very good at it yet. You'll notice that I put a yet on the end, because I'm working on it. I'm a work in progress. And that leads me to one of the things that on the growth mindset part, effort is essential to mastery. When we make the effort to learn something, we can actually bring people along with us. So when I think about Talk to the Duck, I think about Talk to the Duck as a learning exercise. And we will both learn together, either the duck and I, or the duck and Charlie and I, or whomever I'm working with the duck, that I will make the effort to make this happen. As long as I make the effort, it's possible that I can learn. Now, I also see that setbacks are something I can use to try harder the next time. We all have setbacks, right? So there are things, if you'll notice I'm sitting on a chair as opposed to walking around, I have vertigo. I am unsafe at any speed. I just don't do it. I sit down for or stand for my talks, but I don't move around anymore because it would be highly embarrassing for me to fall over, and you would have that reaction. That's not the reaction I want, right? Those are not the droids we're looking for. So I really want to not have setbacks where I can manage them. But in terms of setbacks in my work, I have them all the time. So every so often I write something and people get perturbed by it. There's another P word, but I won't use that one. So also known as angry. And some people don't like what I write because it really offends their sensibilities. No, Agile can't be like that, or Agile has to be like that. So it's really interesting for me to see these setbacks, whether they're a total disaster or a misunderstanding. What can I do? What can I take out of them to learn for the next time? Right, so that's what I want to do with a setback. And the same thing with you. If you try and do something with those QA folks, or with your managers, or with your architects, right, wherever it is you are, and something does not work the very first time, that's okay. Because chances are good you can learn from this. You can do a retrospective, even if it's just a plus minus change, for the next time. Because you're experimenting. You're figuring out what you want to do. I like to think of this as focusing on the possible. Now, when I say focus, I actually mean focus, right? Not try a little bit over here, not try a little bit over there, not try something over there or something over there. I mean, take one thing, focus on it. And when you focus, especially all your attention on that one thing, you will say, oh, I could do it this way, or I could do it that way, or I now have 13 more experiments I could run if I don't get the right results or the results I want after this very first thing. When you focus, you change how your brain works. Anybody here multitasking? Yeah, I see some hands. Yeah, I know, it's so disappointing, isn't it? So one thing you can do with multitasking is to say, I don't like multitasking, but can I make my work sufficiently small so I can make progress on this one thing, get that to done, and then refocus on the other thing and get that to done. That allows me to not have my brain going in 15 different directions all at one time. So I really want my focus to help shape my reality. And that's what happens when you actually focus on one thing at a time. So a lot of us think about our roles or titles as who we are. And I'm as guilty of this as the next person. Every single person I've met here, I'm sure I have asked, what do you do? And you might have told me that you were a manager or a project manager or a QA person or a developer, right? And that's your role. It's possibly your title, but it's not your identity. We all have many, many roles in our lives, right? I'm not just a consultant. I'm also a working woman. I'm also a wife and a mother. I was going to say a mom or a mommy, right? I'm not yet a grandmother. I'm hoping that that will come at some point. But that's yet another part of my identity, but it's not who I am. And all of you have all of these roles and titles that are part of you, but are not the essence of who you are. And if you think about who you are, when you do a career timeline and you expose your values to yourselves, that's the best time to possibly figure out who you really are. And you take that best person, that best part of you, to work every single day. And that's why you can actually do change is good. Now you'll notice that there's the second line on this that says you first. So back when I was part of the TQM movement in my company back in the 90s. So before there was Agile, there was TQM. Oh, there was also Six Sigma. I mean, we have had more fads than you can shake a stick at in this industry. But we had TQM in this organization. So my boss actually said, change is good. I said, yes, you first. And he said, what? Because he thought that TQM meant I had to change. And I said, look, here's the system of our organization. You create the basic culture. I'm a manager. Yeah, I can create the culture for my groups, but you set the culture. I need you to change before I can make TQM really work in here. He said, I'm not going to change first. You go first. Anyone, does this sound at all familiar to you? This might sound like the way you're doing Agile right now. So, and yes, you can do this. At some point, you will bump up against the rest of the organization. But when you say, what can I do first? How can I make this work first? You might actually find some very interesting opportunities for change, some very interesting opportunities to do the kind of thing that you want. So the very first time I introduced Agile to an organization, I was not actually sure that Agile was the kind of thing that they wanted. They were already working in 6-week iterations. This is back in the early 2000s. And they were already working feature by feature. So they were kind of close, right? Iteration-based work, but they had a lot of multitasking. They did not manage their work in progress at all. They really had trouble getting stuff out the door. And I said, what if you reduce the size of your iterations? Instead of a 6-week iteration, what if you went to a 2-week iteration? And they all went, right, you've seen that. Right, you have all seen that in the organization. Even if people don't do it physically, they do it emotionally and mentally. So I said, let's do it this week while I do this assessment with you. How about if I work in 1-hour time boxes for every single thing that I do? And I showed them how I'd already been working in 1-hour time boxes. But I said, what if we do the rest of this problem solving and the rest of this of planning for the future in 1-hour time boxes? Well, let's see where that gets us. And we actually finished before they thought that we would, because the focus of the time box shifted what we did and when, right? This is not a surprise to you. All of us do this. So when I say, change is good, you first, and I say me, as in me first, right? How do I do this and show other people? So if you want to help the QA people do automated testing instead of all manual testing, you might say, what if I work with you for a week and we can see how much we can automate? What are the, or maybe even a day, what are the impediments to automation? You can do this with your teams. You can say, here's a big, nasty problem. Let's figure out how we break it apart into the smallest thing that shows us value first. And that means that you have the courage to become a T-shaped person. So you might have heard about the I-shaped person, where you have deep, deep knowledge. We reinforced that with Waterfall. We had silos of people. We had architects, we had developers, we might even have analysts, we had testers. So everyone had very deep, 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 deep knowledge in one small area. And now we're saying to people, you know, to really get the best benefit of all of the work that you do, we want you to have broader knowledge. We want you to have broader knowledge of the product. We want you to be able to work with people across your team. So yes, a developer is never going to turn into a tester, especially not for their own code, but they might be able to work with the tester. And a tester is never going to turn into a developer, especially not for their own tests, but they might be able to work with a developer. So I have had the benefit of being able to be both a developer and a tester. And I will tell you, when I am the one developing, I cannot test anything. Well, I do test. I always miss the bugs. I am extremely good at creating unit tests that miss every single bug in my code. Every single one. And when I'm a tester, I find those things. It's like they come to me. I'm a magnet. So the same developers, so when I work as a developer, if I'm in the same organization, people always say to me, JR, how can you possibly do this? You never see your own stuff, but you always see mine? What kind of a person are you? And so I say nasty. That's just the only answer for it, nasty. So I think it's really important to say, how deep can I be in any given place? What benefit does that have for me? And how can I help my team when I go broad? What do I need to do to go broad? I have found that when I try and go broad, I have more courage because I can question the way things are. Now, you might want to be careful about how you question. I am the queen of the career-limiting conversation. So don't do that, right? But think about, how do you want to question? Right? This might start from your why and from your personal mission. And then you can say, I can become collaborative. The more breadth I have in understanding, whether it's development and testing, or architecture and development, or architecture and testing, or whether it's this piece of the engine and that piece of the financials and this piece of the admin, right, in your application. What do I need to learn to go broad? And add that to my deep. That allows you to become a change artist. And notice I use the word artist, not a change agent. I'm going to get back to that in a minute. My thing with, when you want to say you want to be an adaptable leader or any kind of a leader, you have to figure out, how do you inspect and adapt to change? So you need to figure out, what is my ability to solve problems? Is it general? Is it just these kinds of problems? Is it other kinds of problems? Can I focus on what could be? How can I improve my adaptability, my perseverance, my leadership? All those things that allow me to make progress, one little thing at a time. Because if you have been working on your Agile transition for a while, you might not think that you've made enough progress. I always like to use quotes for enough. But look back at where you were and look back at what you are now. And I suspect that there's a very large change. So think about that. Inspect and adapt for your Agile approaches. Now, there's a couple of different ways to solve problems, and John Boyd, who was a fighter pilot in World War II, is known as possibly the best fighter pilot ever. He had this OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, and act. And you'll notice that there's all kinds of feedback loops in here. It's not plan, do, check, act, because you can't plan unless you understand where you are. That's what the orient is, and observe. I have a little problem-solving loop, because of course I have a little problem-solving loop, right? I like to invent new things. So I like to say, see your reality, generate options, take a small step, that might be an experiment, and then measure and get feedback and figure out what to do. So because I am not a fighter pilot, I do not have to observe and orient. I can observe, I can see the reality. And in his decision making, Boyd has this notion implicitly of multiple options. But what I have seen in our industry is that we often don't provide ourselves enough options. That's why I really like the rule of 3. Now, you might have too many options. If you work with people who like to leave their options open and generate even more new ideas, anyone work with people like that? They're people who are idea generators. I worked with one guy like that who could not get started on a project because he had so many ideas about what we could do that he could not focus on just one. So with him, I said, take your top 3. He said, I'm not sure I know my top 3. I said, okay, I'll take your top 3. I'll choose them. He said, would you do that for me? No problem. So I chose his top 3. I said, okay, which one is it? He said, I don't know, they're all really good. I said, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, catch a tiger by the toe, right? So we went through that. I felt like I was 5 years old again, and he was happy with the outcome. And as long as he was happy with the outcome, I had helped him narrow his choices. Any of those choices would have been fine. He was just having trouble making a decision at all. So most of the time I don't meet people like that. Most of the time I meet people who say, it's my first option, I'll take it. That's why I really like the rule of 3 and to generate options. Now, when we solve problems, we create change. So let me talk a little bit about the Satir change model. If you were at Gil's session the other day, you saw his version of the change model. We start off in old status quo where things are kind of good and things are comfortable, and then something happens. There's a foreign element. And now, as a consultant, I'm often the foreign element coming into the organization. And if you decide you want to make a change, you might be the foreign element to your team, or to your manager, or to the greater group. And that's when you go into chaos, where your progress and capability is uncertain. So it's not that it always goes down, but it's uncertain. And then at some point you get a transforming idea, and you say, aha, I know what to do here. And then you say, I can implement this. I will use some practice and integration to get better at this, and then I will end up in new status quo, which hopefully is at a higher level of performance than the old status quo. And then when you're ready for another change, it all comes back around again. Now, if you're like me and you like to learn stuff, you get energized in chaos, right? Not all changes are good changes. So if you were planning on going to work one day and you realize that there's a detour and you're already running late, you're not going to be happy with this change. The gas company is changing all of the mains in my neighborhood. I don't know from day to day which streets are going to be open when. So I have started to leave a little bit earlier in the morning because I don't know how long it's going to take me to get out of my neighborhood. Right? It could take 10 minutes, should only take 2. So that's not a change I'm happy about, but that's a temporary change. It's not going to be forever. When we talk about using Agile in the organization, we're talking about a long-term change. People will be in chaos while they figure out, how do I do my job? What is my job now? Right? How do I get compensated for my job? We have all of these questions and insufficient answers. So we understand a lot about the technical work. We understand, in theory at least, how to work together as a collaborative team, how to do automated testing. And now why I said in theory at least is because in practice, we might not yet know how to do this. That's why you need the transforming idea and the practice and integration. I was working with a test manager a few years ago, and she said, I need an automated testing framework before we can start writing any automated tests. I said, really? That sounds like architecture up front. Could you write some automated tests and then decide on the framework? She said, I've never done it that way. Great, so that was a foreign element for her. And until she got comfortable with that and had the transforming idea that this was even possible, she could not do that. And so neither could her team. So one thing you might want to consider as you think about change and what the change model means is that people often don't resist change. They resist being changed. So when someone says to you, please implement this change for that team, they might not mean it in the way I just said it. They might mean it with that team, but it's even more important as a leader to say, how can I collaborate with these people to say, let's do it another way that will be more beneficial for us? How can I make it work for all of us? How can I not impose help or inflict help on this team? I bet all of you have been the beneficiaries of people inflicting help on you. I know that my poor husband, I come home at the end of a long day and I just want to rant and rave. And he says, he's now well-trained. He says, would you like me to help you with that? And I often say, no, I just want to talk. So that he now knows not to inflict help. But it's so hard when it's people we really like and respect, we want to help them. We want to get them to that transforming idea so they can come out of chaos and into practice and integration. So if you really want to do this, you need to figure out, how do I persevere with the change? I like to talk about the value of the change. So we rank items in the product backlog by value. We rank projects in the project portfolio by value. And I really like to say, what value will this change buy me? If I have a problem over here, what is the value of fixing it? That way I know what keeps me going. I understand, why am I doing this? And I can celebrate some incremental progress. So when I was working with a company about how they manage their project portfolio, they took my workshop, they tried to do it, and they said, we're going back to the old ways. I was quite disappointed. But the manager of that group decided he would take some coaching from me. And I decided, okay, at least with the coaching, maybe he can do something. And I realized their problem with the project portfolio was not in their group. Their problem was with the senior management. So it was impossible for them to do the work that they wanted to do unless they could actually get to senior management. So I said, let's talk about how you want to frame this for the people in senior management. You could talk about the value of projects. You could talk about the cost of delay. You could talk about how if you don't multitask, you actually get more stuff done. Would any of that help your senior management? And that's when he said, cost of delay. Tell me about cost of delay. So we had a way to approach senior management so that he and his team could do the work that they wanted to do. And that was a huge shift in the organization. So that little conversation had a greater effect than any of the stuff I had done before. Now, we think about Agile, and a lot of us, especially our managers, don't necessarily realize that Agile is cultural change. If they think about what culture is the way we treat each other, what we can talk about, and what we reward. Agile touches on all three of those. That's from Edgar Schein in his organizational culture book. So it's really important to say, since Agile changes everything from a single person or a single entity being responsible for just their stuff to collaborative work, how do we want to change the conversations? So it's not just about how we do the projects, but it's certainly about the culture. And it's also about the projects. There's a lot of process change in Agile. So you've heard me talk about architects who need to learn how to work evolutionarily, and QA people who need to learn how to work by developing automated tests first, which means they might not need to write down all those test cases, right? That's a huge change in how they do things. And for developers, it's about cohesion and no coupling. It's about doing one small thing and seeing value. It's about partnering with the testers. I also see that teams might change. So I see this a lot in organizations where there's a development group and it has 200 people, and a testing group and it has 100 people. And people's primary affiliation is to their function. In Agile, we want their primary affiliation to be with their project. So it's really hard to have people understand how to change that. When I think about Agile, I like to think about every single person can become a leader on a self-organizing team. And the way the team gets to self-organizing is for everyone to become a leader. So for me, it's this little cycle that we see problems, we generate options, we try a little experiment, and then we measure and feedback and see what happens. So that means that you need to become a change artist. That means you need to invite people to change. So you've seen this, this distribution where we have a bunch of people on the left-hand side that are all gung-ho the change, or all gung-ho Agile, and the people in the middle who are, okay, we'll do it, we need to understand, we're not so sure, but we'll figure it out. And then all the people on the backmost side of the change. People often call these people skeptics, or the people who resist change, resistors. Well, I think that resistors have colors on them and go on to printed circuit boards. I think that people who are on this side of the change, the left-hand side of the change, or at least the far end, have information. They might be concerned about something, and you might not know what it is. They might be concerned about their role. They might be concerned about their compensation. They might be concerned about how can they succeed? How can we know if I have mastery in the role that I'm in now, how do I retain my mastery for later? They have information. And if you think about labeling or thinking about people as resistors, I strongly suggest you figure out a way to get that information. They have valid and useful information for you. So I don't like to label people. I have been known to say, gentleman in the plaid shirt, that's kind of a label, but not really, not in the same sense as resistor. And if you think about those people and how to address their needs, you might say, what's the smallest possible change we can do, right? One of the problems with Agile is that people get on a particular bandwagon and they say, we have to move from having 18-month projects to 2-week iterations, right? We have to have stand-ups every morning, and we have to do this and we have to do that. Now, I happen to really like Scrum as a project management framework for Agile, and I will be the first to tell you, it does not fit every single team in every single situation. I also like Kanban because you can see the flow, and if you have really big stories, you might never see anything flow across the board. So I happen to like flow-based Agile and iteration-based Agile, and I am not particular about how we combine them. I do not pray at any of the gods of Agile feet. I say, let's think about what makes sense for us and do something that makes sense. I invite you to think about artistry of change. And this is really hard, because in some ways, it's easier to say, that was then, and this is now, right? That you actually have a revolution. And my concern is, revolutions often are bloody. I don't want a bloodbath at work. I want people to succeed. I want people to say, yes, I have done this and it really works well. And this is the small thing I did. I experimented with it in this way. And maybe it's not perfect, but it got me better results than this other thing that I was doing. So if we say, let's learn as we go, if we use the growth mindset that says, we can use setbacks as a way to learn from this stuff, then we are exhibiting our leadership. I think it's clear to me, at least, that you can absolutely lead from anywhere. I have many more stories of my leadership when I was a manager, when I was an acting VP, when I was a consultant, but I gave you examples of leadership from my developer and tester days for a reason. I want you to see that you do not have to be a manager to be a leader. You do not have to be a technical lead to be a leader. You don't have to have anything in your title to be a leader. It's what you do, it's your actions that count. And if you are able to be adaptable, then you can change and you can help people change to fit your reality. And now I would like you to go back to what I hope was your small and specific problem from the beginning and work at your tables and ask yourselves these 3 questions. How is solving this problem valuable to you and to others? Because that gets to the why. How will you measure what is valuable? That will help you experiment or create experiments. And what is the first deliverable you can achieve to provide value? So I'm going to give you a little bit longer this time because I think you barely had enough time. I'm going to give you 4 minutes. So have these conversations at your tables. Okay. I hope that you decided to write down some of these answers. And does anyone have anything that they would like to say? Any insights from these questions? I don't see any hands. Okay, so we'll go on. So with Agile leadership, right? Leadership in an Agile organization or the ability to be Agile in your leadership, start with yourself. What can you do to see the environment and to see your system so that you can understand what you could and might need to be able to change? Think about something specific. So if you say this whole thing needs to change, what can you do in this one little area? And how can you collaborate with others to do that? Right? What kind of experiments can you use? And how can you do it? How can you learn from your results and do it again? If you're interested in the references and the resources, these are all the books I believe I referred to today. And I write a question of the week on createadaptablelife.com. In fact, today's question is, what are you waiting for? Which is, I guess, highly relevant to today's topic. I have many, many articles about stuff like this, and if you're interested in the influential Agile leader, Gil and I discuss a bunch of this stuff at that particular workshop. So I thank you. I would like to stay in touch with you, and that's it for now.